I probably shouldn't be saying this. Hell, if I had any sense left in me, I'd shut my mouth, delete this, and pretend none of it ever happened. But if I vanish, you wake up tomorrow and there's no trace of me, at least someone will. Know why? At least someone will know the truth about that job. I took the night shift at a cemetery in Portland. Yeah, I know how that sounds. Who the hell signs up to spend 8 hours alone, surrounded by gravestones and mausoleums? Me, apparently. I told myself it was just another job, easy money for walking the grounds, keeping trespassers out, maybe scaring away the occasional drunk. Rent was due, my fridge was empty, and desperation makes bad ideas look reasonable. When I first signed the contract, I laughed about it with a friend. Graveyard shift at a graveyard, I said, like it was some kind of cosmic joke. The irony wasn't lost on me. At the time, I figured the only thing I'd be fighting off were raccoons and boredom. But now I know better. There are rules here. Rules I didn't understand at first. Rules that sounded more like urban legends than workplace policy. I can't tell you all of them yet, not because I don't want to, but because if I lay everything out right now, you won't believe me. You'll think I'm some washed-up guy trying to scare strangers on the internet. And maybe that's what I want you to think. Maybe disbelief is safer for you. Still, I'll give you this much. The cemetery doesn't belong to the living. Not really. The ground looks quiet. The stones are still. And from the outside, it's just another piece of old Portland history. But underneath, between those cracked marble slabs and tilted headstones, something stirs. You don't see it during the day when the tourists wander in with cameras and flowers. You don't feel it when the sun is up. But when the last rays of daylight vanish behind the trees, when the gates clang shut and the city hum fades into silence, that's when the rules matter. That's when the cemetery wakes up. I shouldn't even be telling you this much. Every keystroke feels like I'm pulling at a thread that's holding me together. And I don't know how long before the whole thing unravels. If I disappear, if you never hear from me again, just remember this: I didn't quit. I didn't walk away. The job doesn't let you do that the first night. I realized the dead don't stay quiet here. Asterisk, I still remember the smell the first time I stepped through the gates: damp earth, wet stone, and that faint metallic tempts you get when rain clings to rusted iron. The cemetery wasn't the crumbling, overgrown ruin I'd pictured. It was too clean. The grass had been trimmed with military precision, the gravel paths raked smooth, the headstones scrubbed so thoroughly they gleamed like teeth. It was the kind of neatness that felt wrong, as if someone were trying a little too hard to convince you nothing rotten lay beneath. The man waiting for me didn't help. New hire, he said, eyeing me like I was a stray dog that had wandered too close to his porch. He was tall, thin in a way that looked unhealthy, and wore a coat that smelled faintly of soil. His face was lined, his hair the color of ash, but his eyes, that was what got me. Too sharp, too awake, like he hadn't blinked in years. Yeah, they said I'd be working nights. He nodded once, slow, and gestured for me to follow. His boots crunched on the gravel as he led me deeper inside. I'm the groundskeeper, you answer to me. No name offered, just that flat statement, like an order. I tried small talk, something about how peaceful the place seemed, but he didn't bite. The only sound was the rustle of trees and the occasional caw of a crow. Finally, he stopped beside a stone bench. Near the chapel, he turned to me, his mouth twitching into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so joyless. Before you start, you need to know the rules. Now, when someone says rules, you expect stuff like clocking. in on time, or not smoking near the gas tanks. But the way he said it, like each word carried weight, felt my stomach tighten. He held up a hand, one finger at a time. First, never leave the gates unlocked. Doesn't matter if you're gone 5 minutes or 5 seconds, they stay closed. Seemed obvious enough. Security 101. I nodded, double quote second. Don't answer if someone calls your name after midnight. That one made me pause. What if it's an emergency? His stare hardened. It won't be. Right, I muttered, trying to sound casual, though my throat had gone dry. Third, he continued, if you hear children laughing, you hide. Don't try to find them. Don't try to stop them. Just hide until it passes. Children in a cemetery. I almost laughed, but his face was stone. My own grin withered. Fourth, never look at the angel statue for too long. If you do, you'll know why. I didn't ask for clarification. Something about the way he said it made me feel like the less I knew, the better. Finally, he raised his last finger. Always leave offerings at grave 47. No exceptions. Flowers, coins, anything with meaning. Just make sure there's something there by the end of your shift. Offerings, I repeated, as if saying it out loud would make it less ridiculous. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. These rules aren't for me, they're for you. Break them, and you won't last the week. And just like that, he straightened, dusted off his coat, and walked away, leaving me standing there with my skin prickling and my heart beating too fast. I told myself it was superstition. Old cemetery, old caretaker, old stories meant to scare off rookies. But something about the way his eyes never wavered, the way he didn't smile once, made it hard to laugh it off completely. The rest of the orientation was uneventful. He showed me the chapel, the maintenance shed, the office with its outdated clocking machine. He explained where the patrol routes went, how to log incidents in the book. On the surface, it was like any other job, but I couldn't shake those rules. They hung in my head like storm clouds. Don't answer your name, hide from laughter, grave 47. Who comes up with that? And why? By the time he left me alone to start my first shift, the last of the daylight had drained from the sky. The cemetery was swallowed by shadow, the lampposts casting thin halos of light on the paths. I walked the grounds with my hands stuffed in my pockets, trying to convince myself I was fine. Some part of me wanted to test it all. I mean, what were the odds? Kids laughing in a graveyard at 2 in the morning. An angel statue that did what, exactly? It was all ridiculous. When I reached the gates, I noticed they were still ajar from when I came in. Absent-mindedly, I thought about shutting them, but then shrugged. What was the harm? No one was around. Besides, it was just a job. Rules were made to be bent, right? And that was the first one I broke. Asterisk. It was quiet, until it wasn't. For the first half hour, the place was dead in the way you'd expect a cemetery to be. My boots crunched against the gravel path, my flashlight beam skimmed over headstones, and the silence pressed in from every direction. Portland's city hum didn't reach this far, at least not at night. Out here, you could almost believe the world had emptied itself of people. The fog rolled in slow, swallowing the gates, the chapel, even the lampposts, one by one. My flashlight seemed weaker than it should have been, like the mist was drinking. The light straight from the bulb. The shadows bent strangely, toolining across the path like they didn't belong to the headstones that cast them. I told myself it was just my eyes adjusting, but every time I blinked, the shapes looked a little different. I tried to focus on the job, walk the perimeter, check the gates, keep notes in the logbook. Nothing supernatural about that, but the air felt heavier with every step, like the whole place was exhaling against me. By the time I reached the far side of the grounds, the silence had grown so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Then came the footsteps. At first, I thought it was an echo of my own a fraction of a second out of sync. But when I stopped walking, the sound kept going, slow and deliberate, crunching against gravel somewhere just behind me. "Hello," I called, my voice bouncing off stone and fog. No answer. I swung my flashlight around, but the mist seemed to swallow everything beyond. A few feet, just graves, trees, and shadows that leaned too far. I forced myself to laugh. Probably a stray animal, I told myself. A dog, maybe, but dogs don't whisper your name. It was faint, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. "Hey, name." My name stretched thin, each syllable cracked like dry wood. I froze. The caretaker's voice thundered in my skull. "Don't answer if someone calls your name after midnight." I glanced at my watch. 12:14 a.m. My throat went tight. Whatever was behind me had chosen this exact moment. I clenched my jaw, said nothing, and walked on. Each step felt like dragging chains through the fog. The whisper came again, closer this time, but I forced myself to ignore it, to keep moving. I wanted to believe silence was enough to protect me, but the feeling of being followed didn't stop. The footsteps returned, slow and deliberate, always a few paces behind. I didn't need to turn to know something was there, hovering just at the edge of the light. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a shape taller than any headstone, darker than the fog, but whenever I turned, it vanished. All night, it lingered, never rushing, never retreating, just following. If I stopped, it stopped. If I walked faster, it matched my pace. I told myself it had to be nerves, an overactive imagination, a trick of sound. But when I passed a row of graves near the angel statue, I swear I saw it, a figure, long-limbed and featureless, standing just beyond the last pool of light, and it was waiting by the time dawn bled through the trees. My nerves were frayed raw. The footsteps had faded with the first streaks of sunlight, the whispers gone like they'd never been. All that was left was me, pale and shaking, clutching my flashlight like a weapon I knew was useless. I tried to rationalize it. First night. Jitters, maybe. The brain playing tricks in the dark. And yet, when I logged my shift in the office, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I told myself I'd get used to it, that it was just nerves, or exhaustion, or the fog messing with me. But even as I wrote down uneventful shift in the book, I couldn't shake the memory of that voice curling through the mist. And I can't stop thinking, that was just the first rule I bent. The first night, the first whisper. I didn't know then how bad it would get or how fatal breaking those rules really is. Asterisk, after that first night, I couldn't just go home and collapse. My nerves were buzzing too hard, like static in my blood. I needed noise, people, something alive around me. That's how I ended up at a little diner a couple blocks from the cemetery. The kind of place that never closes, greasy counters, cracked vinyl booths, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. I figured I'd get a plate of eggs, maybe talk myself back into believing I was overreacting. Instead, I found out I wasn't the only one. There were two of them in a booth near the window. both wearing the same grey uniform shirt I'd been issued. One was a guy about my age, stocky, with tired eyes. The other was older, maybe late 40s, with a face like carved stone. They looked up when I walked in, and when they saw the uniform, the younger one gave me a tired smirk. "Fresh meat," he said, waving me over. I slid into the booth, trying not to look as rattled as I felt. "First night," I admitted. "You guys work the cemetery too?" "Worked," the older one corrected. His voice was flat, almost bitter. "I put in my years. Now I drink coffee and pretend I sleep at night." The younger one leaned forward. "So, how'd it go?" I hesitated, thinking about the footsteps, the whispers, the shadow that lingered just out of sight. "Quiet," I lied. "Mostly just fog." They both laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that reaches the eyes. More like the kind people use to cover something they don't want to talk about. "You'll learn," the older one said. He stirred his coffee with a chipped spoon, eyes fixed on the swirl. "Don't test the rules. People vanish here," the younger one added, almost too casually. "And don't forget Grave 47. Grave 47's got a mouth." He grinned like it was some inside joke, but my stomach turned cold. I thought about the caretaker's instructions, about offerings and consequences. "You're serious?" I said. Neither of them smiled. I tried to press for details. What happens if you break the rules? Who made them? Why no one outside the job seems to know, but they shut down quick. The older one muttered something about the city council looking the other way, about containment measures. The younger one said nothing, just stared at the table like the answer might crawl up from the cracks in the laminate. I pushed. "Containment for what?" That's when it happened. The older guy opened his mouth to answer, and then he just stopped. His words cut off, like a tape spliced in the middle. His eyes glazed over. His jaw went slack. For a few seconds, he just sat there, motionless, like something had reached in and unplugged him. The younger one nudged him hard, whispering, "Not here. Not here." Slowly, the older man blinked, came back, and muttered something about needing more coffee. But his hands shook so badly the cup rattled in its saucer. I didn't ask again. Whatever had happened, I didn't want it happening to me. We sat in silence for a while, the clink of dishes and the hum of the neon sign filling the gaps. Finally, the younger one leaned in close and whispered, "You'll see for yourself soon enough." That was all I got. When I left the diner, the city felt different, emptier, quieter. The streets were the same, the people the same, but I couldn't stop hearing his words echoing in my head. "Don't test the rules. People vanish here." By the time I reached the cemetery gates for my next shift, my hands were sweating. I told myself I was ready, but deep down, I already knew IWASN, single quotes, asterisk, the nights blurred together, one bleeding into the next, until I couldn't tell where exhaustion ended and dread began. At first, I tried to convince myself the footsteps and whispers were a trick of nerves. But the cemetery doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. It escalates. The second night, it was the laughter. I'd been making my rounds, flashlight beam cutting through the fog, when I froze. A sound floated across the graves, thin, high-pitched, and wrong. Children laughing. It was 2:47 a.m., I know, because I checked my watch the instant I heard it. Clinging to the logic that documenting details might keep me sane. It didn't sound like joy, not really. More like mockery, like playground taunts muffled through dirt. The hair on the back of my neck bristled as the laughter swelled, echoing off the stones in every direction at once. The caretaker's words clawed through my memory. If you hear children laughing, hide until it stops. So I ducked behind a mausoleum, crouched in the shadows, with my heart in my throat. The laughter drifted closer, skipping from grave to grave, circling me like vultures. And then it stopped. Just like that asterisk. When I stepped out again, the fog was thicker. The silence was heavier. My flashlight flickered twice before it steadied. By the third night, it was the angel statue. The thing towered over the central path, wings spread wide, hands clasped in prayer, face tilted toward heaven. Harmless, right? But every time I passed it, something shifted. The tilt of the head, the angle of the wings. The stone wasn't where I'd left it. First time, I thought I'd misremembered. Second time, I forced myself to stare at it for a long minute, committing every line to memory. By the time I circled back, its hands had moved, no longer folded in prayer, but spread apart, palms out, like it was reaching for me. I couldn't prove it, couldn't photograph it, but the dread was real. Asterisk. By the fourth night, one of the graves looked freshly dug. The earth was turned up, loose and dark, as though someone had just been buried. Door was waiting to crawl out. I checked the logs, checked the burial schedule. No new interments for weeks. That was the first time I really asked myself, was this place changing to mess with me, or had it always been this way, waiting for me to notice? I wanted answers. Fear has a way of curdling into defiance, and mine did fast. The rules, I decided, were scare tactics, a way to keep me compliant. So I started testing them, small things at first. I lingered near the angel longer than I should have, daring it to move while I stared straight at it. My chest tightened, my vision tunneled, but I swear its lips parted just slightly, like it was about to speak. I staggered back before I could see more. The next night, I did something worse. I forgot the offering at grave 40-7. It wasn't deliberate, at least not at first. I'd been so rattled by the laughter, the footsteps, the constant pressure of the place that I rushed through my route. By the time I realized I hadn't left anything, dawn was breaking. One night won't matter, I told myself. It's just a superstition. That morning, I heard the scratching. It started faint, a skittering under the floorboards of my apartment. Then it grew louder, like nails dragging against wood. I tore up rugs, checked vents, convinced myself it was mice. But when I pressed my ear to the floor, the sound wasn't beneath me. It was beneath them, buried. That night, I returned to the cemetery with trembling hands, clutching coins to scatter at grave 47. But as I approached, the sound started again, scratching, insistent, from beneath the soil. I dropped the coins onto the dirt. The scratching stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse, like something had gotten what it wanted and was waiting for more after that. The cemetery followed me home. I'd wake in the middle of the night to the sound of shovels scraping concrete, dirt under my fingernails when I hadn't touched the ground, footsteps pacing in the hallway outside my door, stopping only when I held my breath. Once, I woke to find a handful of grave soil scattered across my kitchen floor. My apartment windows were locked. I live on the 3rd story. I started keeping the lights on, but it didn't help. Darkness isn't the enemy, it's the silence. The waiting, every shift became a battle with myself. Follow the rules, or defy them. And every shift, the cemetery seemed hungrier, the shadows bolder. By the end of the week, I was unraveling. I kept thinking back to what the guy at the diner had said, Grave 47's got a mouth. I believed him now. And I believed it was whispering my name, waiting for me to lean close enough to hear. I don't know how many nights I've got left. I don't know if following the rules is enough, or if the job just chews through people until there's nothing left, but I do know this. I've already broken too many rules, and this place doesn't forgive. Asterisk, there's something. I haven't told you about Grave 47 yet. I didn't want to. I thought maybe if I ignored it, if I treated it like just another patch of dirt with a cracked headstone, I could get away with pretending it was normal. But the cemetery doesn't let you look away forever. Eventually, it forces the truth into your hands. It was the caretaker who broke first. I'd been working the shift long, enough that my face had gone grey with exhaustion, my eyes bloodshot from nights of broken sleep. He found me near the chapel one morning, after a particularly bad shift where the angel had turned its head fully toward me, eyes cast down instead of up. I couldn't hide how shaken I was, and maybe that's why he finally spoke. "You've been breaking the rules," he said flatly. Not a question, a sentence. I swallowed hard. "You knew," he gave a humorless smile. "The dead always know. And they tell me." That sent a chill right through me. But before I could respond, he motioned for me to follow. He led me past the chapel, through rows of old graves, until we stood at the edge of number 40-7. Up close, I saw it differently than before. The headstone wasn't like the others. It leaned, cracked not by time but by pressure from below, as though something inside had pushed against it. The soil never settled, always loose, always damp even on dry days. "It isn't a grave," he said, his voice low. "It's a mouth, a gateway. Call it what you like. The rules keep it shut. The offerings feed it, distract it, keep it from hungering for bigger things." I stared at him, waiting for a punchline that never came. Face stayed still, grave as the stones around us. "You think this is a job?" he continued. "It isn't. It's a duty. We're not employees, we're wardens. The cemetery is a boundary between worlds, thin here, like paper soaked through. If the rules aren't followed, the dead don't stay buried. They come back. Wrong, and worse things, come through." I tried to laugh, to push it away as madness, but the sound died in my throat. Every memory of footsteps, whispers, laughter, the scratching from Grave 47, they all locked into place like puzzle pieces. "Why me?" I asked, almost a whisper. "Because you needed the job," he said. "And because the cemetery needed you. It always finds someone." Then he told me the part I still can't shake. The rules aren't for keeping you safe. They're for keeping the dead fed. Every mistake you make, every hesitation, every broken rule that's a morsel, they feed on error, on defiance. The laughter, the whispers, the angel, all distractions to make you stumble. And when you do, they feast. I wanted to argue, to deny it, but he grabbed my shoulder and forced me to look, not just at the grave, but into it, and that's when I saw it. Wasn't a hole, not exactly, more like a crack in reality itself. A thin seam of darkness, splitting the world open, writhing like it breathed. Faces pressed against it from the other side, blurred, twisted, stretching as if the soil was glass and they were drowning behind it. Mouths open in silent screams, hands clawing upward, not to escape, but to drag someone in, and they saw me. I know they did. Their eyes locked with mine, and for a moment, I felt them pressing into me, filling my skull with 1,000 hungry voices. I staggered back, clutching my head, but the caretaker only watched. "That's the truth," he said, That's what we guard. That's why the rules matter. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My vision swam, and the world around me warped. The graves bent inward, their stones leaning like they were bowing to something buried below. Shadows crawled across the ground, spilling from the mouths of the carved names. I saw them, then the souls trapped in the cemetery. Some hovering over their own headstones, translucent and restless. Others stretched thin across the air, pulled like cobwebs between the trees. They weren't peaceful, weren't at rest. They were starving. The caretaker's voice cut through the nightmare. Now you have a choice. Obey the rules, keep the balance, or break them and join the graves. I blinked, and the vision shattered. I was standing again in front of grave 47, the fog thick, the headstone leaning. The caretaker was gone, as though he'd never been there, but the choice lingered, carved deep in my chest like a wound. Obey forever, or sink into the soil. And God help me, I don't know which one is worse. Asterisk. You ever have the sense that the air itself is waiting for you? Like the night knows your name and is just holding its breath, waiting for you to stumble. That was how the final shift began. From the moment I unlocked the gates, the fog pressed, in heavy, thicker than I'd ever seen. The lamps burned weak and sickly, halos of pale light that barely touched the ground. My flashlight flickered the second I clicked it on, buzzing like an insect about to die. Even then, I knew tonight. Every rule was going to be tested. The first came quick. I'd barely made it past the chapel when I heard it. My name, soft at first, whispered like a memory, drifting on the fog. Then louder, closer, as if the voice was right behind me. I clenched my teeth and forced myself forward. Don't answer. Don't turn. The rules drilled into me. But with every step, the voice sharpened. It wasn't just saying my name anymore, it was speaking in my own voice. Please, it begged. Don't leave me here. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood and kept walking. Then the laughter started. Children, somewhere near the east wall, giggling, running, the sound of bare feet slapping against wet earth. It circled me, darting closer, fading away. My skin prickled with sweat. I knew what the caretaker had said: hide until it stops. But where do you hide in a cemetery when the night itself wants you? I ducked behind a row of headstones, crouched low, praying the laughter would pass. It didn't. It grew sharper, crueler, and then, just as suddenly, silence. That was when I saw the angel. It had always been unsettling, but now it was worse. Its head, which once tilted skyward, was bent fully forward, eyes locked on me. The stone lips had cracked into something like a smile. I swear its wings twitched, stone grinding against stone. I raised my flashlight and the beam caught on eyes that shouldn't reflect, eyes that glowed faintly, like dying embers. I stumbled back, heart slamming, but the cemetery wasn't finished yet. The ground beneath me shifted. Grave 47. I hadn't even realized I'd wandered straight to it. The soil churned, pulsing like a living thing. The headstone rattled as if something inside was pounding against it. And then I heard it. Not whispers, not laughter, but a voice so deep it vibrated in my bones. Hunger, it said the word, like a prayer, like a demand. The soil split open. Hands, if you could call them, that twitched up from the dirt. Too long, too thin, fingers bending backward like broken branches. Faces rose from the soil, mouths stretched wide, teeth jagged like broken glass. They weren't climbing out. They were reaching for me, to pull me in. I ran. I didn't think, just bolted through the fog, heart hammering in my chest, the cemetery twisting around me. Headstones leaned as I passed, names rearranging, paths bending into dead ends that hadn't been there before. Behind me, the children's laughter returned, but now it was wet, gurgling, inhuman. I made it to the gates, but they were closed, locked, and I knew I hadn't locked them. The caretaker's voice echoed in my head. Never leave the gates unlocked. And in my gut, I realized what that meant. They hadn't been locked by me. They'd been locked by something else. I turned, pressing my back to the iron bars, and there it was. Grave 47 had opened wider, a pit yawning in the earth. Something immense shifted inside, its form too large to fit into words. It wasn't just a creature, it was absence itself, the kind of darkness that swallows light, swallows thought. And within it, countless faces pressed forward, wailing without sound. The angel moved, not much, just one step, but that was enough. The sound of stone grinding against earth split the silence, and my knees nearly buckled. It was walking toward me, wings spread, eyes burning brighter. I screamed. I don't even remember what words left my throat. Maybe a prayer, maybe a curse, and then the caretaker's voice, not in my ears, but in my head, calm, cold. You've seen it now. You don't walk away from that. You're marked. Either obey or join them. I don't remember choosing. I don't remember unlocking the gates, or how I ended up outside. 1 second I was pinned between the angel and the pit, and the next I was stumbling down the street, the cemetery shrinking behind me like it had never been there at all. But I can still feel it. The mark, like soil under my skin, like whispers, threading through my thoughts. Sometimes, in the dead hours of the night, I hear them calling again. Not just my name, yours too. If you're listening to this, maybe it's already too late, because the rules don't end at the gate, and I think Grave 47 is still hungry. Asterisk, if you've made it this far, then maybe you understand why I had to get this out. Why I couldn't just keep it locked inside my head. Because the truth is, I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending life is normal after that cemetery. I still wake up with dirt under my fingernails. I still hear voices when the world goes quiet. And some nights, I can still feel the angel's eyes on me, watching, waiting. I shouldn't even be sharing this. Every part of me says, the more people who know, the worse it gets. But silence hasn't kept me safe either. So here it is, my confession, my warning. Now I need something from you. If you know anything about the Portland Cemetery, if you've heard stories, rumors, urban legends, leave them in the comments. Please, I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know if anyone else has walked those same fog-drenched paths, or seen Grave 47 move when it shouldn't. And don't just think this is an isolated place. That's the part that scares me most. The rules aren't unique to Portland. I've read fragments, online whispers about motels with locked rooms, hospitals with forbidden floors, train stations where you never board the last car. Different jobs, different rules, but the same kind of hunger behind them. What if it's all connected? What if every place like this is just another piece of the same web, another doorway feeding into something we can't see but are already tangled in? I've tried convincing myself it was just a job, just a paycheck, just nights walking between stones and shadows. But that's not true anymore. The line between normal and nightmare doesn't exist once you've crossed it, once you've heard them call your name. So here's the last thing I'll say. And maybe the most important, if you ever find yourself taking a night shift somewhere strange, if they hand you a set of rules that don't make sense, don't laugh, don't shrug it off, don't test them like I did, because I thought it was just a night shift job. I was wrong.